why a parenting or a unparenting? Can you just unpack the word unparenting? You don't want the parents to be parents.
All of us, became parents with a certain script in mind. This is the kind of father and mother I'm going to be, and that is where the damage begins. You end up passing on that very unrealistic high standard to your kids that they have to be this. They should be gentle and they should be kind, but also appropriately aggressive, and also confident, but also meek, and obedient at home, but go getters outside. How on earth is a child supposed to do that? And with the pandemic, all confidence is just, your world is upside down. There is no routine, there's no discipline, there's no when is he waking up, when is he sleeping. Of course, you have to give him gadgets because he's very lonely all the time. And, there are no friends. So everything you know about parenting changes.
You are Reema here, and you are Meera on Instagram. So what's the it's Reema 2.0 something like that.
It's not. Thank you first. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Nagpur, for turning up. It's a pleasure being here. So the story of when you're born and you're sort of expected to fit into a mold. I think all of our parents do that, not with any sort of malevolence, I'd say, but it just happens because they have their own idea of what kind of kids they want, and they're not really thinking about who is this little person in front of me. By the time I was 30, I realized I was at least four people inside. And the journey from Reema to Meera was, in a way, trying to rediscover at least one or two of those four people to be my most authentic self, as authentic as you can be on social media. Because, again, that is a platform that is both very enabling but also scary at many levels, especially for women. Um, but still, it just allows me to be the closest to who I am in person, which unfortunately a lot of my immediate family context has never done. It's never given me that freedom to be completely me. So when I made that account, I was like, okay, let's play around with that. And I've always been in love with the name of Meera. It's poetic, it's beautiful. So I just went with that. बहुत ज़्यादा इसमें कोई philosophy नहीं है.
It's pretty interesting for that. So as I mentioned that the book is brave because you've left yourself threadbare on in that book, all of it. You're all out with it. But it's so relatable. Like the beginning, the chapter which is called The Beginning. And when I started I was like, oh, I'm like done and dusted. My children have grown up. Why do I need to read this? But when I came to the middle of the chapter and you wrote no Mamtahood coming out at all. We just were like, just please leave us alone.
लेके जाओ इस चीज़ को.
And it was so reassuring because probably I haven't said this or I never was told this. There was a shame probably around if I would have said, well, ye kaisi maa hai? Like, she's why is she like that? So you have these revelations, and this book is so reassuring in so many ways. It's also enlightening in so many ways. So honestly, when we come to the book, you got me at the cover. Like, why a parenting or a unparenting? Can you just unpack the word unparenting? You don't want the parents to be parents, you want them to be friends, or what is it that you want to convey?
The idea of unparenting is basically to unscript. All of us, became parents with a certain script in mind. This is the kind of father and mother I'm going to be, and that is where the damage begins. Because you've set yourself a very high, unrealistic standard 99% of the time, and you end up passing on that very unrealistic high standard to your kids that they have to be this. They should be gentle and they should be kind, but also appropriately aggressive, and also confident, but also meek, and obedient at home but go getters outside. How on earth is a child supposed to do that? It's a bloody khichdi we make out of them, yeah, and of ourselves in the process.
Yeah.
So the idea was to unscript the idea of parenting, the idea of also bringing up children. Why does it have to be an either or? That either you be strict and authoritative, or you be friends. Parents cannot always be friends with their children. Sometimes they'll be parents, and that is also needed. But if we keep holding on to a certain specific idea, we will keep falling short. And we will either punish ourselves or our children. So that is where the whole unparenting came from. About the cover, I was very happy with the cover when we made the cover, which was way back in 2020. And I signed the book deal in the December of 2018, and I was very confident about it. I was like one of the very inflated parents. I'm doing this so well. I'm so proud of myself. इतना woke बच्चा है मेरा. उसको gender के बारे में पता है. उसको feminism के बारे में पता है. And then, as if God had a plan to, and the pandemic happened. And with the pandemic, all confidence is just, your world is upside down. There is no routine, there's no discipline, there's no when is he waking up, when is he sleeping. Of course, you have to give him gadgets because he's very lonely all the time. And, there are no friends. So everything you know about parenting changes. So from the confident, happy, chirpy book, it also became a serious book. I stopped writing for 2 years because I felt I have no business telling anybody else how to parent when I am struggling myself. But then I thought, why can I not bring in that vulnerability into the book? Let me make it part of that because that's also who we are as parents. We are also very, very fragile. Um, then I didn't agree with the cover. I didn't like it. I said it's misleading. People are going to think it's all happy and chirpy, and it is very serious in bits if you stick with it.
Yeah.
But then the publishers were like, at least they'll pick it up. Because most parenting books, they look so dark and gloomy that nobody really, picks them up. And she did say, look, it's both. It's also trying to be something that has maybe not existed before. So let it stay. And it looks good. It does look very good. Thank you.
Yeah, it does. For a parenting book, it's quite a relief not to be hanging around with a gloomy book around. So, coming to the writing process that you just said, so was it that I read the book, now that you also mentioned it's not a very happy book, was it cathartic? Like, taken you have again, like, you involve Imad also. How did he take that you are like he's part of it and his privacy was also infringed in the way? So, and I really admired the way you have woven poems in it, the way you have Pablo Neruda there, you have your own poems, you have some expert advices from different parenting experts. So, what was the plan? Like, what were you trying? This
There
book
was no
was
plan. It was zero plan.
like, what's supposed to be a memoir or just a parenting book or some motivational book? Because
So,
it's a lot other than parenting.
yes, there is. Because parenting is a lot other than parenting. It is one of the biggest things
Definitely.
you'll ever do in life. It's a vast undertaking and it requires you to unpick and unlearn everything you've known about yourself as human beings. So it cannot be one thing. Like I said, the idea of one script, it does not exist. The process of writing it, thank the Lord for my agent who gave me a semblance of this is how you write it. Otherwise, you would have had, I think, 120,000 words ka itna mota kitab. So he made me divide it into chapters. And once you have that thing in your mind that this is what I'm going to maybe be talking about in this chapter, you sit down, you recollect because it's mostly personal. There was a lot of recollection happening. Also, talking a lot to my friends who've known me for 20 plus years, who also are raising children on their own. Talking a lot of conversation, and then Imad, my son, would keep, saying something offhand, and I would make a note somewhere. And later, there were, Facebook entries that I had saved that I used to make before the book was even an idea. He would say very random things. And I would laugh so much, I would like, chalo, isko share karte hain. So those, I had to look them up and, oh, let me put this, let me put that. And that idea of, his privacy, to be very, very honest, that's a blind side that happened to me. Because when I started writing it, he was very young and he was very happy about the idea that the book was about, also had him. He was like, but when it came out, he's close to 15. He didn't want to touch it. He was like,
Yeah.
he didn't want to go to any of my events, not because he was not happy for me, but he's a teenager. They don't want to be in the limelight. At my book launch, he was right at the back. And he didn't even come at the stage. That is how much it has affected him. And there is a part of me that is sorry that, I maybe put him in a place which he's not ready for. But then that is also something you cannot foresee. You can't plan all of this in advance. It just happens to you. Of course, there was his enthusiastic consent that I took. Are you okay with including this incident? Are you okay with including this incident? And he was okay with that. But it still does something to you, to see your picture on the cover, to see, your mother suddenly becoming very popular and she's no longer just your mother. She's
Of
so
course,
many
you share
other
with,
things.
yeah,
So yeah, it was cathartic
growing.
as well. It was also in bits very, very, how shall I say, self exploratory. It made me understand a lot of things in hindsight. Because when you're young, you sort of follow through so much. But when you recollect a lot of stuff, you remember. And a lot of that remembering was not very pleasant. A lot of it was also unpleasant, like the things I'd done wrong and wishing that I had time to sort of rewind all of it and do it all over again. The things that were done to me, that was also, unpleasant. That this happened and that happened. So it was a mix of everything. I wouldn't say at any point I felt this kind of elation that, oh, I'm doing this amazing thing. I think I'm the one person who's constantly been undervaluing it, and it has taken other people, my friends, my agent, my editor, to tell me, no, you've done good, no, you've done good. But that's also my personality. I question everything I do. But yeah, it does.
Because
It's
you've
like
been
a
humble.
no, it's not about that. People say it's a very confident book. If only they'd look
Yeah,
inside,
but
you
it
know.
is. It is a very. I mean, it takes real guts to
Thank you.
whatever you have written and whatever you have come up with. So now the book is about awkward truths. So now I think most of the people are here for those awkward truths.
Yeah.
A few of them. So do you think the parents can ever be well prepared to answer the sex related questions? Like you are like, maybe, when my child is 10 and I'll do that puberty talk, and then suddenly your 7-year old comes and he's access porn. So you are always taken, uh, you're always taken aback, and then you're like, oh god, what happened to those milestones? And especially after pandemic, after this digital, these people became those digital natives, they stopped existing in this world. And so how do we catch up, and how can we make internet our friends? Like two
I think,
things, yeah.
yeah, I think the first thing that we need to understand is that there is no catching up. We are way behind and we will remain behind because that is the nature of the world we inhabit now. They know things that we couldn't even dream about, you know. They have the
And
world
then
at their fingertips. They are so savvy socially, but if you make them sit with friends at
and then
dinner, they don't know how to have a conversation. They do not know how to make eye contact. They are fidgety all the time. They're aliens, honestly.
that's
And I
right. They are
think
different natives, like I
they
said, they're
are
digital natives, they
they are
don't exist
different,
here.
but they're also smart and funny, and they have this language that is so full of references. I think the only way we can prepare ourselves is to be a very good eavesdropper, to like to come किस बारे में बात हो रही है you know. And I do that all the time, not in the sense of I'm invading his privacy, but I keep an eye out for what is he reading, what is he watching, what are the shows that he likes. Let me at least have a look at 1 or 2 episodes, because their universe is like, it's somewhere else. So you have to find doorways into that universe to figure out where is he really at. What are the I was surprised to find the other day that my son listens to the Beatles. I was like, कि इतनी पुरानी चीज तुम्हें कैसे मिल गई? The internet, Spotify. I just found it. I'm like, okay, I thought you were only into, the new fellows. So I think keeping an eye onto their playlist, their friends, where are they hanging out, what are they reading, gives you a sense of their inner world, their inner compass. And then you can be curious about it. I think the biggest mistake we make is we lecture a lot. हम हर टाइम उन्हें लेक्चर करते हैं, ये क्यों नहीं, ये कैसे, एंड आई ऑल्सो डू दैट. आई एम वेरी गिल्टी ऑफ दैट. But if you become curious about what is it that you're doing, they let you see more. They let you know more. And they will then genuinely feel like, my parent cares. And that's one way to sort of be prepared of where is my child at. So when Ahmad was about 6 and 7, I already knew that he was picking up stuff from people, and he used to read a lot then. Now he doesn't read as much. But I knew what books he was reading. I knew that the time was coming when he's going to, start asking me questions. if you keep telling yourself or using the past as comparison, in the sense, what was I like when I was 7, 8? What was I reading? What was I doing? You cannot be prepared. I think the past is a good thing to use in terms of emotions. What did I feel like when I met new people when I was 13? What did I feel like, when a boy looked at me when I was 14? Those are good places to look back and learn from. But in terms of what are they exposed to, the past is not going to. I think in that sense, awareness really prepares. And I feel like we do not have that excuse of not knowing anymore, because there is so much available that wasn't available to our parents. So yeah, pick up books, read blogs, listen to podcasts, whatever you can manage in your own time. Even then, knowing that this is one of the most thankless journeys ever, and we will always fall short. Always, always. And that is okay too. I think that is okay too. That's something we have to tell ourselves. It's okay. There will be some places that will never be, you cannot cover them all. And I think that is where the universe steps in. What I cannot do, maybe a friend of mine will do, maybe an uncle of his will do, maybe an aunt of his will do, or maybe he'll find a teacher. It's one of the things we also do is to feel like ये सब मेरा ही काम है, नहीं है भाई, हमारा maximum काम to keep them fed, keep them clean, keep them safe, give them the basics of life, make them somewhat socially functional, teach them a little bit about money, about their bodies, and you're okay. The rest they'll learn in their own time with so many other people they'll meet. We cannot do everything.
We don't know what's going with them. I mean, however much we can claim that we talk so much, we'll never know. So, but because you are in the field, there is this, I mean, you have to bust it for us if it's a myth or a fact that the kids nowadays are involved in sex much earlier and much more, like much younger, and do they give that more time, more energy in the just a thought, or the narrative is that is it true, like
It is true.
what it was 10 years
It is
ago?
true. It is absolutely true. Think of it like this. What was your access to the other gender? ट्यूशन क्लास में ना इधर से देख लिया, दैट वाज एक्सेस, उधर से देख लिया, जरा सा हाथ ऐसे लग गया, that was the access we had. These kids have all the access in the world, and we're giving them a lot of money that makes a lot of things possible, that makes dates possible, that makes buying presents possible, that makes hotel rooms possible. We have to understand that the world is set up in a way where there's availability at the click. It's there. And we've also given them gadgets, and then we complain that they're doing things that they're not ready for. Of course, they're doing things they're not ready for, because we gave them gadgets when they were 8 or 10, something that they're not going to be ready for till they're 15. I've done that too, because we did not do our homework. We didn't study about what does this thing do to the nervous system. It makes regulation impossible. It keeps making you want to the next best thing. It keeps, instant gratification is the thing that they just know. We know how to wait. They don't know how to wait. So, yes, it is true. But what is also true is that with the access, there is also some information. And that is where we step in. That if they are sexually exploring, that is okay. I think if we had the chance, we'd also do that. We didn't. We were very strictly policed. It is in our genetics, in our biology, to start exploring sexually by the time we're 14, 15, 16. You know it. You feel it in your body. You know that strong urge when you see someone you're attracted to. Which is why I think the earlier generations made marriage early a thing. That jaldi shadi kar do, this will be taken care of. But now they're not marrying till they're well into their 30s, and we want them to stay celibate. Very bad.
But younger, like I said.
I know what you mean by younger. Their stuff is happening at 13, 14. Trust me, it is. It is. I have lots of spies, all ages, because, I can pretend to be fun, so they tell me stuff. पता है आंटी आज क्या हुआ स्कूल में? So yeah, a lot of stuff is happening, but they're also smart, and they know how to sort of stay out of trouble. We like to believe they're all innocent and all, but they're not. They सबके Instagram account in तीन तीन चार चार, they're chatting and all of that, and they have like they put passwords and locks everywhere you can't even imagine exist. They are very smart. So that is where we need to grow some brain. And before we give them gadgets, child proof them or something, or have like you have these very smart software where you can figure out what app your child is using. You can't see the content, but you can see what apps they're using. And that begins very early. That begins when they're 2, 3, 4. That's where we've, I think our generation of parents who are in their 30s and 40s, that's where the misstep has happened because we weren't prepared for how big this is. But parents now, I think, can make that correction, and older parents can accept that this is what the world is like now. What can I do to make sure that I'm not coming from a place of judgment, but I'm providing some safety, some information, and I'm not trying to be very prudish and trying, what is it that hurts us about our children being sexually active? Think about that. I think part of it is also resentment. They're doing things it is. And it's also fear. It's also
Yeah.
fear. It's fear. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
It's fear. It's also terror. It's your own moral values, your religious values. I come from a very religious background. It was hard for me to see the world that is now. But I also had to accept, what am I going to do if I pass on my religious values to him? I will be smothering him, suffocating him, and making it 100% surety that he will move away from me. So my values are for me to follow, and he can. This world maybe needs a mix of different kinds of values, and I think that's how we sort of make this. I don't know, safer.
That's about it. Like only we can go that much. So again, like so again, there's this new fad happening. Probably your son must have told you. Like the number of gender identities, especially being bi, is a new fad, like a new trendy thing to be. So the whole inclusivity dialogue, is it getting lost on them?
I'm so glad you asked that because a lot of people shy away from these questions because our real, authentic opinions on them can be very unvogue. I feel, because I've been working in this field and the research I've done, that a child as young as 11 and 12 cannot really decide what their sexual identity is. Their biology is still in very formative state. Yeah. So when they come up to us with things like that, we can learn to be, sort of, I know what's going on. The world has become very label oriented. This is that, this is that. And it puts a certain kind of pressure on children to identify very quickly. And it's also very cool. Like mental illness was cool 3 years ago. I'm schizophrenic. I have anxiety. I'm bi. It's become one of those things and it's unfortunate because that is not what we set out to do. People who were, working for inclusivity. But that has what has happened. But, what can you do about it? What you can do about it is provide information and not react explosively if they come and tell you things like, oh, I feel like I'm this or I feel like I'm that. Give them the space to keep exploring and try and gently nudge them to not make very loud decisions or proclamations because we will evolve and change. And when they do change, also be sort of accepting of that. But you're very right, Priyanka. The dialogue has completely moved away from inclusivity to exclusion. It's doing the exact opposite. And the same is true for feminism also.
There is another like shaming happening for people who don't recognize or
Who
probably
don't know.
who don't
Not
know about
everybody
it.
will know
Yeah.
that language. Not everybody will know that there is a thing called pronouns and appropriate pronouns, and that is okay. But now we started shaming people who come from a different, cultural ethos, and I feel like that is that's very, you're excluding them from the narrative completely. Just like feminists are now excluding men, because everything about men is now bad, which is not true. And but I think that's how the wheel moves. You have to get to that state to realize that there's something that we are missing, and then you start making repairs. Who knows?
Yes, and I'm sorry to point out this because you have broken up all of it for us: gender, sex, reproduction, dating. Why is not gender identity a part of your book? Like, we needed some help
Thank
that way.
you. Thank you so much. You needed help. I needed even more help. It's my first book. And I'm Muslim. And why is that relevant? The context that I come from, a lot of these conversations are very taboo. So it's not a question of me being scared of what will people say. It's a question of me still exploring what I feel. There is a part of me that is very firm on this is what I believe. But there is a part of me that is still figuring out where do I make a distinction of what I've known since the time I opened my eyes in this world to be true is not true for me anymore. It's a kind of unpeeling that requires a lot of work. I think it's life work. For some things, I have been able to do that. No, this is what I feel is right, even if a lot of people frown upon that. But gender is something, especially because of the way it's moving now, that I have become very uncomfortable with the whole thing. So there was a chapter on gender. I scrapped it because the world wants definite answers, and for the life of me I could not put definite answers. Just like in bullying there are no definite answers, it was the toughest chapter for me to write. So while writing gender I was like, I'm going to really confuse people more than I'm going to help them. Let me come to a point where I am myself more sure of what I feel about this, and then maybe there'll be a next something. That's why it's not there.
Probably. So, I was about to point out later, but then money is also one subject where we falter, not educating. Like, we miss the financial literacy, which, so probably you could add that too.
Yeah, I could add that definitely. I'm very bad at the whole money thing, which is why it's not in the book.
That's what most of us are. So we need to go there. So when we are in that conversation, like you have guided us, so I'm not going through that, or the future readers will go through that. How do you break it, and how do you do it very age appropriately? And it doesn't start at a point, like you mentioned, it doesn't start, has to start at when you're 10. It goes like from your safe touch or good touch, bad touch, like we said. But I really like the idea of a safe touch and unsafe touch. So can you it'll put light, show light on
On
what
that,
on why not good touch and bad touch? Because I've had also some experiences with that, and I really appreciate that this new language of safe and unstay safe rather than good and bad.
sure. So a lot of really bad touches can actually be good for us. For example, going to the dentist. It's a horrible touch. You never want to go to the dentist again. But is it important and necessary for you? Yes. Similarly, for a lot of young people, especially who felt abuse, labeling touch as good can be very problematic because there are sometimes responses physiologically that can feel pleasant, but emotionally you're feeling horrible. And there's also the pain and pleasure sort of thing that people discover later. Do you call that bad too? So what do you call bad and what do you call good? I think that's really labels touch itself. And when you bring up kids being afraid of touch like that, it really does impact their intimacy levels or the way they feel explore sexuality later on, which is what a lot of couples who I work with really struggle with. That there is that part that is still stuck somewhere inside because that label of bad is stuck inside. That this is bad or that's bad. Which is why I feel that safety is something that's long term. Something can feel pleasurable when you're younger. For example, being in an abusive relationship is very pleasurable when it's good. When it's good, it's really good. But it's bad, it's really, really bad. But is it safe for me? Is it good for my health and well-being? Is it safe for my future? So I think that in that sense, safe and unsafe, it's a non-judgmental, and it also is non-confusing. Good and bad, if someone is grooming you to abuse you later, they will be very good to you. They'll bring you sweets and chocolates, they'll make friends with you, they'll know all of your secrets, they'll win your trust, and that feeling is really good. And then they go and touch you. So if you tell children good and bad, it's going to confuse them because but that person was very good to me, and this happened. Yeah. maybe that's why.
Yeah, like when it was done in my son's school, and then he was, then I saw when I went to pick them, and the children were crying, bad touch. The maybe the ayah just help with her diaper or something, and is like, yeah, I don't want to go because
That happened a
they
lot.
got so confused over exactly what a good touch and a bad touch is. So now that how can we make these conversations whenever the many times we do, how can we make it gender neutral and include body positivity, because we struggle sometimes when there's a thin line which happens when we are trying to be body positive, but then we want them to eat properly, we want them to dress appropriately, but it borderlines to body shaming. We keep on, and then these people are like too woke. They're like, you can't body shame me. If you're like, you've lost weight, and they're like, you can't body shame me. So how do I strike that balance and make it gender neutral, the conversation generally gender neutral?
That is the problem of labels, exactly. That you give them a lot of labels that this is body shaming and this is body positive, and they'll start using it. And yet, for ourselves also, what is body shaming and what is body positivity and what is not. आजकल मुंह खोलने से भी डर लगता है कहीं कुछ बोलो so someone will say that you're something, you so it's a very difficult question to answer, but I think one goes with so my standard has been, is it life, is what my child doing life threatening, is it unsafe, does it put him at risk of any sort? If that is happening, then I have a conversation. So what is a short skirt doing? Yes, it can be a little problematic in social environments, and you want to pass on a certain sense of, where you've come from and your culture and all of that. Is it potentially life threatening? I don't think so. Yeah. So I think, and even that is a very simplistic example. I don't like it really. These are very difficult things to do. I think what we can sort of pay attention to is, if the child is, say, for example, older and then they're making these choices, please understand you've let them have that mini skirt in the first place. So if you've let them have it, then they will wear it, you know. And if you've let them have a weird tattoo, they will flaunt it. So I think it starts from not just clothes or hairstyle, it also starts from much before. What is the environment that you've made available for them? And just to get a sense of, if I'm uncomfortable, is this more about how I will be perceived as a parent, or is it more about I'm worried for my son or my daughter? 90% of the cases, it's how will I be perceived as a parent. Yeah. So maybe, then taking a stand. It's very, very nuanced, it's complicated. I'm sorry, I don't have a straight answer to this. But I think those three things have always helped me. If what my child is doing is life threatening, risky, unsafe for himself and for others, then I found a way to put my foot down. And he's used to it because I've been doing it from a very young age, putting my foot down. So you cannot have that. I'm really sorry, but you cannot have that. I understand you're upset. I understand you're angry. I know you don't like me anymore. That's okay. I think when you say no, that you have to be prepared to not, for them to not like you anymore. Okay.
Instantly.
Okay. It's not my job to be adored by you.
So um, you have been talking to a lot of parents and much younger parents also. So what's the one mistake even the most devout or the most woke parents also do still? Like, we're like, why are people doing this still? Like, has it happened to you?
Many things. I think the one thing I get really, really irritated and pissed off by is wealthy parents mistreating their help in front of their children. Because I think it just does something to your child's brain. They're watching that. As it is, this generation is very annoyingly entitled. Because we have made them like that. We have given them everything even before they were ready to receive it or honor it or ask for it or take care of it. And then we go around, yelling at helps in front of them. I don't know if I can say this here, but there's one thing that really, really gets my goat is when people go with families to a restaurant and they'll have the childminder sitting at a different table. That really, I don't know, it does something to me. I want to get up and say something. That if you have someone who's taking care of your child, whose family, eat with them. How hard is it? Maybe it's, I don't know how appropriate it is to say this here, but since you didn't really mention a segment,
Yeah,
this is
I mean, generally, what
generally,
happens?
yeah, modern day parenting, I really, it just very annoys me a lot. This, and I think when people, and again, you can't be judgmental when you say things like that, because I understand what's happening to parents also. We're trying to fit in somewhere that is not ours, really. The whole globalization has brought a world to us, to all small towns, and all older families where your culture is no longer cool. So I get why parents want to speak only in English, why they suddenly sprout an accent, because it also gets you access to the better schools. Yeah, it also gets you access to the better clubs. It also gets you access to the better social communities. I get why that's happening. Yeah, so I get why we're also moving in this direction of disowning everything that was ours, and sort of appropriating everything that is not essentially ours. But then again, who gets to decide what is ours and what is not ours? In a space where everything is a khichdi. But I do feel like some effort to uphold in the way we are as parents, our way of maybe speaking, our food, our dress, our literature is important, because they're just glamorized by this thing called America, and we are just no longer cool. And I feel like that's sad. That's sad.
I was looking like, is oversharing happening? Like, do like parents become too intrusive? Too like, I read somewhere and I know someone who was talking about sharing ethical porn and talking about toys to the kids. So is it also happening, or
How old were the kids? I'm curious.
they were much older and they weren't in India for that. Probably there it is like a, but I still feel it's quite an infringement of your privacy. So
Whose privacy? Their privacy? Parents' privacy?
both privacy, like why do you want to
Sorry.
guard there? So, but then there's this fine line. So many times the parents are talking about their divorces, their dates and all that. Eventually, like you also said that. So they become too friendly and take the. I mean, is oversharing happening and
I
kind of.
can't speak for other people. What I can say is that when we expect our kids to become our friends in any situation, if they're not emotionally mature enough and if they're young, I think we're placing a burden on them. And I really feel like there is no appropriate way to do this or not do this, because it entirely depends on the family dynamic. For example, imagine there's a young mother who has, either been in an abusive relationship or has divorced or is recently widowed and has a child who is 10 or 12 and is a boy. So you take into account the history of what being a boy means. You become your mother's support. You are now going to have to take care of your mother. Yeah. Tum uska sahara, all of that social noise that we hear. Then there is also something inherent in men. They want to take care of the women around them. Yeah, they want to be the ones who are responsible. So, in that sense, the mother then learns to slowly depend on the child. And with that depending, also comes this, sharing grief or emotion or what am I feeling. And it's very hard to draw the boundary of what is over and what is not. So it is very, very subjective, Priyanka. It's a very context driven thing. Because for every family, so for my family, there were times I ended up sharing things that I later regretted because I was very fragile when my divorce happened. And the only person closest to me was my son. There were times he would see me crying or, see me in a bad state and he would ask me, tell me. I'm like, no, I cannot talk to this about you. You're young. No, but tell me, I want to know. If I know, it will bother me less. So you see, what will I be doing? Will I be oversharing or will I be putting him at ease? But yes, for things like as much as possible, trying to see can I take care of this on my own or if I have a support system. I think for most parents what happens is when they're in tricky situations they don't have a support system, especially women, because they've been trained into this way of focusing entirely on this family. They've lost touch with old friends or they don't have friends, and thankfully that is changing now. And as they grow older, their only support system is their children, and we end up offloading a lot on our children. And I think that's unfair. So making sure that you have your own support system to sort of share with, take advice from. Your children will, they might put up a brave front, but sometimes they're not ready and things will bother them later on. So, yes, for me also, later on, I realized that I shouldn't be telling him about who I'm dating because it does, create expectation and hope in him. And that is not fair. That's not fair. But I learned it after, and it's okay for everyone to do that. Yeah, we'll all
Yeah,
learn in
learn
our own.
in
Yeah.
the process. So that you this in your practice that you do sexuality education and counseling. So do you think or do you find that child abuse, especially if it is a known person, or is it is it shoved under the carpet, or a rape victim is still a lonely person, or being a victim is a lonely place to be?
I think very recently I've noticed a change that parents are stepping up more because they're so afraid. Because thankfully, mental health has become a thing now that is talked about, that is spoken about. So they're also becoming aware, and they know that if we don't support and don't step in, things can happen. So there is a slight change, but it only belongs to a certain economic demographic where parents have the capacity to extend that kind of professional help to their kids. But mostly, I think it is people other than parents who end up supporting the children, if at all. For very young children, children themselves don't know they're being abused often. And by the time they figure things out, it's already, a lot of time has passed. There is a lot of silence still, there is a lot of stigma, and even if it's not external, it always is internal. The internal shame and guilt, nothing can change that really, unless there is, timely and intervention and a lot of loving support. But the child grows on to experience himself or herself in other contexts, and that takes care of that. Yeah, but it is
But
still,
it's changing.
it
But
is very slowly, I'd say, changing. Like recently, I've noticed parents bringing their children to me to say this has happened and how can we support. That's new. That's really new, that them asking. Earlier it used to be, this is the problem, fix it. But now it's like, how can I support my child better? What do you need us to do? And listening also. But again, there's a certain economic demographic. It's not everybody. Yeah.
so, coming to sex ed again, why is there not a structured program? Like, and how, like you said, it's only a particular strata of people who are little educated and maybe. So, how can we go, or how can you reach the rural the rural area or the people who really need it? Because sex ed is not to just not like a life skill, it has huge social implications. So why do you think, what is like lacking? The parents are ready, I think the children are ready, the school's almost ready. What is stopping us from having a structured sex ed class?
Please show me 10 schools that are ready.
They aren't.
Show me 10 schools that are ready for inclusive sexuality education, not just reproduction, wala chapter,
Hmm.
whatever. Schools are not ready.
No.
Schools are not ready for sex education or sexuality education, as I like to call it, because it includes the whole spectrum of what are relationships like, of gender orientation, of abuse awareness, of grooming. How does abuse actually happen, and body positivity, bullying. All of that comes under the umbrella of sexuality education. Schools are not ready to have young individuals who take ownership of their bodies, because then how will they function? How are they going to discipline and rule everyone? Because that is the structure schools are based on. You empower a child when you give them sex ed. You give them a voice. It's very hard to abuse kids who have been properly, you know, gone through the process of sexuality education, or they take ownership. It's very hard to then shepherd kids like that, which is what traditional schooling is. It's a factory run practice. They want everybody to say yes and obey. It has its uses. Yeah, it makes for good discipline or whatever. I don't like it. But it
It
gets you
does.
good grades and then good
Yeah.
jobs, etc., etc. But what does it do to the individual? Very damaging to individuals, the school system. Of course, they don't like it. You're going to tell a bunch of kids, teach them how to say no. Will they like it? They're going to say no to everything. Yeah, so I think if you look at the rural environment, they are already very, very open about sexuality. They know how to have fun. They're very open about pleasure also. To teach sex ed from a place of body positivity and pleasure, which is what we do not talk about at all, that is, it's hard in schools. And we may like to say that, oh, how do we get this to the rural areas? How do you get into your homes? Ask yourselves, how many of you are ready to talk about pleasure with your 17, 18-year olds? You don't even like to talk about it with your wife or husband. बच्चे से कैसे बात करोगे? Yeah. And this doesn't come from a place of judgment. It comes from a place of deep acknowledgement of the fact that shame lives in us as Indians. And it's sad because we also once celebrated our bodies. I think we have to go a little backwards before we can move forward.
Yeah, so unlearn all the parenting probably. So we've run out of time big time. So no, even I kept on
I
asking.
warned Sachin, I do not follow time.
It's fine, but I have a few questions, but now I think we'd like to open the floor for the audience. Audience, we would like to keep your questions crisp and not like please don't ask very child pertaining questions. Like she's available later for and then she does counseling sessions and workshops too. But we would appreciate if you have a very generic question.
So, not exactly a generic question, but one of the biggest tropes you see in media today is that of the evil step parent, right? So, any thoughts on how someone who is a step parent or is planning to going to be one, how they can travel that road of bonding with the child and yet parenting the child without really being the parent, not having a say at times.
Very interesting question. Thank you for asking that because I'm also sort of in that space myself personally. I think we have to understand where the step parenting comes from first, yeah, and to see if it exists in the family that one is planning to step into. Does that kind of trope exist? Does that kind of dialogue around othering exist? Because anywhere you hear talk of someone as the other, as the villain, as the dangerous person, they will not just be doing it in one context. They will not just be talking about an evil step parent. The parosi will also be evil. The mother-in-law will also be evil. Falani ladki will also be a badmash, and falana ladka will be gunda, because this is a mindset. So if you are knowingly going into a black and white mindset family system, then you have a lot of work cut out for you. Yeah. So in that sense, in the sense of that, I think you might have to ask yourself, how am I prepared for this? Am I prepared for this at all? And can I go into this knowing that there might never be full acceptance? And if the answer to all of that is okay, there might never be full acceptance, do you want to fit into that mold of being a step parent? Can you not just be a family person without attaching a label to yourself? Yeah, because I do not think that a role left by somebody else can be filled by someone else. Yeah, I don't think all of us need to be parents in that sense, or dad or mom. Like, you know if for example I'm dating somebody and I'm serious and that person wants to marry me and I want to marry him, is my expectation going to be he becomes a second dad? That is where the pressure comes in. So it's also about having those honest conversations with your partner about what is your expectation from me vis-a-vis the child, and then asking yourself realistically, how much of this can I fulfill? Because it will also include money, it will include boundaries, it will include what say do you have and who the person sees, or the child sees, marries, what school he goes to. If you are willing to take a step back for all of those decisions and be there as a friendly, supportive, warm presence, you should be okay. Yeah. I think a lot of honest conversations with the future partner and also with yourself to see how much am I realistically willing to take, because it can get very ugly.
What would you suggest? Because as already has been noted out, that parenting is very culture specific, uh, and we parent uh, with our social values, political ideologies, the kind of religion to which we belong, and we would like to Sanskritize all those with those religious practices and all that kind of stuff. And we impose it every time. That is what is parenting all about. Right. So, when you are talking unlearning, how would you suggest unlearning from all this kind of stuff at the first place? Right. Secondly, you might have seen Dangal and Tare Zameen Par. Both are two contrast stuff. One, where there is a privilege of addressing a problem of the student, and then you argue that let us find out the interest of the student and then accordingly shape his career. That's a that's a privileged position. Right? There is another Dangal. There is no privilege. She has to be forced into because she has to be liberated from it. So all those people who are from the marginal communities, from the underdog communities, much of the parenting goes into this whole pressure that you have to come out of this. So this is a contradiction in terms. So how do we apply parenting to these kind of situations?
I think the unlearning, to answer the first one, the unlearning begins by, I think, looking at ourselves. How much of what I carry has helped me in my life? How much of it do I truly honor? And how much of it do I uphold simply because it is a question of class, approval, love, respect from my parents? Because a lot of us, we uphold a lot of things, and it's something that is, I think, in every child's fate, wanting, seeking a parent's approval. I think most of us did things in the beginning for that. And some of those things really helped us. No arguments about that. But some of those things were very and continue to be very painful. For example, somebody wants to leave a corporate job and start an NGO. The parents will not be happy. What about your security? What about this? Or the wife will not be happy. Anybody who is attuned to approval will find it very hard to take their own decisions. So if you're a parent like that, chances are you've passed on the same parenting style. Parenting works in patterns most of the time, not always, but there are very definite patterns you can figure out. You watch parents interact with their parents, you'll figure out what are they likely to do or not do. Yeah, the opposite is also true. Sometimes we act opposite of how we were parented. Yeah. So if we ask ourselves these questions, then we can somehow manage to unlearn some of what we imbibed unconsciously. If something has been terribly painful to me all my life, why would I want to pass on to my child? I think unlearning takes a whole lot of courage, and also recognizing the fact that in the first place, maybe we did not have kids for them. Maybe we very selfishly had kids for us because we did not think, what is this individual going to be like? We didn't even wait for it. We tried to force something from the very beginning. And I'm not saying we've done that out of malice, but that is how we are, as human beings. We want mini us all the time. If you would see my son, he is my exact opposite in everything. Yeah. It has been very hard for me to accept that. Even with my training, even with the work I do, it is very hard to accept that. But you do if you want friendship to thrive, if you want him to come back to you, if you want him to be your own person, you have to let go of the idea of what did I want for my child. It's a struggle because we hold on very tightly to the idea of what was my idea when I wanted to have a child, not what am I willing to give and place for this new life coming into my life, how much am I willing to support it, and just let it be at that. Yeah. Maybe asking these questions can help. I know it's very vague, but then that is also life. I don't have a script for this. It's very messy business. About the other thing, there have been advantages to that kind of discipline. And that is also something that we need to recognize and honor. And I also say it in the book. The idea is not that Indian parents have been doing all mistakes only. No, that is not true. Not everything about the old and traditional is bad. It has also made us very incredibly resilient. It has made us fighters. People have, overcome huge obstacles with this generation will sweat at. just thinking, because life is very comfortable for people who are sort of financially okay now. It is very, very comfortable. You don't have to strive for much. And knowing that, I think personally for me, I mean, I can't answer this very objectively. It has to be a personal choice that you make. I would be unhappy knowing that my child is unhappy doing something. And that's how I would make this choice personally. So my son gave up reading four years ago, and it made me very unhappy because he was a very good reader, and I love reading. I write. I've written all my life, but he gave up, and I was like, what do I do about this? He's taken up gaming, and now it's gymming, and then it's football, and now it's tech music, none of which I like. Yeah. So, what do you do then? You make room, you have compassion, and you remind yourself you have no business directing this life. You can only guide it, maybe teach it a few things. Bhai, learn to manage your pocket money properly. Have a bath once a week at least. Things like that. Cut your nails. Baki, don't hurt anybody. Baki, they will do what they will do. So I think the choice for me personally is I will look at pain. Am I inflicting pain? That is not okay for me. So I don't know. It can be your own way of, you can have your own compass. And again, it's a subjective answer. Question,
But
yeah.
I think you have made this clear in the last chapter about emotional and mental health, that children are not our report cards. I think that really sorts out a lot of things for us. That so much pressure that we take as parent and call parenting too hard or too difficult is because we just judge ourselves for whatever they are doing, which is not the fact. They are simply different human beings with different genetics. We somehow just think about their our genes, and but they're like a big mosaic of so many genes and so many traits, which, and we are also discovering as like we are not photocopies of our parents. So why do we want them to be? So I think when we think of, we just take off that burden of not really performing as parents, probably that really helps us.
Thank you for that, Priyanka. And I just had an afterthought that the second movie you mentioned, Tare Zameen Par, that is an idealized world. I wish more schools were like that. I wish more families were. Even that family is not very pleasant. Yeah. That is an idealized, very, very idealized version. And the truth, I think, is somewhere in between those two realities. There are some things we will have to push for, and some things that we will have to be gentle about.
I've not yet read your book. I intend to. But I have a question. I'm a single parent. I found it incredibly difficult to raise my kid. Um, what would you say about parents playing good cop, bad cop? Which is something that happens very often, and the situation is usually worse when one parent is, uh, far away and can afford to play good cop. Is there anything you have to say about that?
I've been a single parent for 10 years, and I have been the bad cop always, when I was married and even now. It's a very difficult path to tread. Despite all of the flag bearing about single parents, it is not something you want. And I think parents choose that only when they know there's no other resort, there's no other hope. Nobody does it happily. Because ideally, kids need more than one person. It's a lot of burden. I think for single parents, accepting that perhaps we will have to give up that place of happiness and joy and friendship if we are to maintain certain boundaries and certain discipline, because you're the one who's handling the child, living with the child, you're the one responsible for the safekeeping of the child. You will have to be harder than the other absent parent who can waltz in with presents and, wow the kid. I think that's a very hard pill to swallow. And they listen to them. One word, one look, and they'll be like, and we can yell and say all we want, but not heard. And that is tough. For me, I'll just share what has helped me as a single parent. In having a very robust community of friends has really helped me, because I can take away all my emotion over there. I can take away my anger over there, and then I can come back in a sort of lighter, frame of mind and tackle whatever is needed. and also paying attention to how do I feel when my child reacts to me or calls me, you're a bad mother, and you're always yelling at me. I feel pain, right? Taking care of that pain is important. As much as possible, seek help, have counselors, have friends. So you're unloading this, and then you are ready to be with your child because your job is tough. Yeah. And also at the end of the day, understanding that no matter how much they'd be in awe of the gift bearing parent and the charming parent, they come home to you. Yeah. That is only yours. No one can take that away.
First of all, thank you for your refreshing honesty. I feel better about, I feel like I'm an okay mom. I'm not doing too bad after listening to you. So thank you for that. My husband and I have an ongoing debate, and it has something to do with the fact that now you can put tracking devices on your kids. And he's like, if we get it, we should do it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. So, there's this fight, I think, between technology and between, keeping your kids free. And so, what are your thoughts on it?
Why do you need a tracking device on a 6-year-old? Maybe need it on a 16.
I don't want a device on a 12 or a 14-year-old.
No, I see. I think all of this is fear. Yeah, all of this wanting to track and this and the big bad world and all of this is all fear. We are so navigated by fear. Is our external GPS as parents? Ding 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 ding. Bring focus on how can I enable my child to have a voice when something's wrong. How much of practical knowledge can I pass on to the child in terms of danger? Is there any kind of, karate I can make the child learn? Or recognizing what is the most powerful thing you can pass on to your child? The most powerful thing you can pass on to your child is getting them in tune with their inner compass. A child's inner compass will always know whether a situation or a person is safe or unsafe for them. That is what we override. We override it with our commentary, with our ye mat karo, yahan mat jao, wahan mat jao. We trust that inner ability that all of us have to read a room. Child will read a room like nobody else. वो जाएगा ही नहीं उसकी गोदी में जो उसे पसंद नहीं होगा. पहुंचा के दिखा लो. Yeah, but we force it. No, no, पैर छो, no, no, गोद में जाओ नहीं. It's okay if that falani auntie hugged you or kissed you. Why? We don't let them have autonomy, and then we're afraid. You teach them autonomy, and then see what your bacha becomes.
I'm a mother of two, and one thing I decided when I became a mother was that I will not do things that what I felt my parents were when where they went wrong. You know what stayed with me. I would try and not do that. And one of those things was that I always felt that my mother was, biased towards my sister. She's just 6 years younger to me. So I was like very sure that I'm not going to give that feeling to my children because I've seen in others also because it stays. It does not go. It stays for a very long time. Even I know people, it stayed with them till now. They're 42, 45, but they still feel, that it was unfair to them. So, but when my child comes to me and says, "Oh, you're partial to bhaiya," or you treat the younger one like the baby of the house, how do I deal with that, and how do I explain it to myself also? Did I actually go wrong there when I was so sure that this thing I'm going to balance it out? And how do you make the child understand that it's not that? Because I know it will stay with the child for a very long period of time.
So I may sound very clever, intelligent right now, but I am sure I have done things to my son which he will never forgive me for. That's what happens when you put two individuals so up close together. Certain eruptions will happen, they will stay. What you can do is ask yourself, is what the child is saying, is that really true, or is that the child's way of trying to get away in a situation? Because they do that. Yeah, very chalak. They know how to sort of, and that is their survival working, no? It doesn't make them bad or mean, it's survival. That is how we survive. We are pitted against each other and all of that. So making sure that there is not a competitive mahal in the house, that you're not praising one inordinately. We also tend to do that. Whichever child takes after us or picks our hobbies or has our interests, you become softer. It's human nature. You can't help that. And that kind of is picked up by the other children. So making sure compliments are fair and even and they are given a lot to both children. And if they come up with certain things like that, you ask them questions. What exactly did I do that made you feel like that? Chances are they will not have a specific answer. or they will have something very vague to say like us din or tell me exactly how. And then also gently reminding them that you're there to sort of make sure that they're not hurt or whatever the context of the situation is. And I'm doing that, and I'm sorry you feel bad about it, but I have to do this. Yeah. So context based, basically. Yeah.
So, conflicts are a major part of any domestic relationship or any relationship for that matter. So, in the parenting context, is there something that you would like to share around conflict management or conflict resolution or negotiations? That is one. And the second part is around building a psychologically safe environment. Is there any tangible tools or techniques or methods that parents can read or get trained on, or receive external help?
We need that. I think a lot of conflict management in households, because we never taught that, not in our culture at least. We're not even taught to how to have a sensitive conversation without stepping on eggshells. It becomes very, very defensive and reactive, and you're all over the place. I think the first thing that helped me, and it took me a long time to figure this out, was how did I see conflicts in my household, in my family when I was growing up. 90% of Indian families are very passive aggressive. Nobody will talk about what's happening, but everybody will be, will have like a thunderstorm in their face. मतलब massive passive aggression क्यों भाई मतलब बोल दो ना मुंह से. So if that has been your pattern, or if violence has been your pattern when you were growing up, if you've seen like a mother or a father, and mothers can also be very, very violent. Let us not make women out to be the saints they are. Most of the people who come up with abuse have been massively abused by overworked, overburdened, underprepared, and tired mothers. Yeah. So if that has been your environment, chances are you've carried on those unconsciously. So the first thing we can do is to understand what is my style of conflict. What do I do? Do I bang the door and go and mope in my room and expect and wait for my child to come say sorry? Because that is most of us. We want the child to say sorry, even if we are wrong. And we make no room to hear their feelings. So if they're being angry and yelling at you and having an opinion, that is normal. That is something you want to encourage, not shut down. And we are so comfortable with their opinions. If they have an opinion contrary to us, we'll shut it down. The first thing you can do is just be mindful of giving them a space to have opinions, to share emotion, to vent, even to rant, also within limits, of course. Not that it is punishing for you, but if it's within limits, they're allowed to be angry, and then making room for them to come back and talk about it. So I'll share an example of how I do this. So lately, my son is into the door banging scene. He'll walk away and bhar, and he'll be like, and my habit was in the beginning to go after him usi samay. Big mistake. I am hurt. He is hurt. You go there, something drastic will happen. So I take care of my emotions. I have a cry or whatever, have a cup of tea and sit down and breathe. Wait for the child also to calm down. Children will always come back to you because that is how much power you have. We have so much power and we abuse it every single day. They will come back to you because they want your approval, they want your affection, they want your pyar. When they come back, don't be nasty. Make room for them and talk about what is it that happened. Do you want to talk about it? If they don't want to talk about it, respect that, especially if it's a teenager, you don't want to cross that boundary. Yeah. But tell them, I'm here for you and we can talk about this whenever you're ready. But these are the things that are not acceptable for me. You cannot raise your voice at me. It is not okay for you to go bang that door. You can tell me I need time out and leave. That is okay. Having ground rules helps. I've had these ground rules from when he was about 7 or 8, when I grew a brain. Before that, I was doing it all wrong. Yeah. So maybe think about, how do I do conflict? How do I do it with friends? How do I do it with partner? Then how are you performing conflict in front of the child when it's with other people? They're watching. They will play you very nicely. Yeah. And they will also imbibe all of your passive aggression or violence. So I think those are the ways. To answer the second one, I think almost all of us need to pay attention to, is there any specific trauma in my life that I've not paid attention to? Because when we have a lot of it, I can only talk from my own experience. I had a lot of trauma when I was married, and I was not aware of how it was impacting my relationships, all my relationships. कोई भी कहीं भी कुछ भी गलती होती थी किसी से भी कोई भी गड़बड़ होती थी I used to go into this, oh no, this has happened to me because I am so bad or because I am unlucky. It's all my fault. This will always happen to me. What does that make you? A very unpleasant person to be around. And you exacerbate the situation. The reverse can also happen. People can get angry very quickly, and most of it comes from our childhood or early youth. So as much as possible, trying to paying attention to what are the unhelpful patterns that I'm carrying. Read about patterns. Read about basic psychology, about how to have good conversation skills, how to manage your own emotions while having difficult conversations, while being in relationships, all of that, boundary setting. But please, please, please stay away from Instagram gang. That's the worst thing possible. They make everything bite sized और उस हिसाब से तो इस कमरे में हर दूसरा आदमी toxic है. They're it's very weird. So just have like wholesome knowledge about that. And if you're confused, talk to a counselor, get in touch. And as much as possible, young parents especially, don't be shy of asking for help. Lean into community, to friends. Keep those friendships alive and real, not just, be going to brunch dressed in a pretty dress friendship. But I am having a breakdown, I need someone to hold me friendship. Yeah.
How do they tell their child that they are adopted? Or what do they do when they've been hiding it from their child and the child comes to know that they are adopted? What is your opinion on that?
So, how are we going to tackle this when the time comes? Or do we tell them beforehand or we tell them later? But if it is something that's already happened, I think either which way there will be emotion. There will be some blame and there will be some pain that one has to sort of unfortunately bear. The best parents can do is to keep reassuring that no matter what your reality is or what your origins are, we are and will be your parents. And there is no reduction in that. And be prepared for some reaction, some displacement, some confusion, maybe even a desire to seek out biological parents or to suddenly become very reactive. And it will take a lot of grace and compassion to stay the course. But I think just reminding yourself of what was my vision or desire when I adopted this child. If it was love, and I think a lot of adoptive parents do a far better job at loving than biological parents because they do it out of the sheer necessity of it. I want this being. Most biological parents have no idea whether they want it or not. Honestly, वो हो जाता है. And then they're like, what do I do with this? So, yes, and I think, if you're that child or if you know that child, also reminding them of the good aspects of those parents who brought you so willingly into their life. That's brave.
As you have heard from the audience itself, Unparenting with Reema was a certainly illuminating and a refreshing session. Reema's engaging conversation with us certainly encourages us not to evade direct answers to unsettling questions. I didn't know very much about parenting since I'm not a parent, but you made it quite approachable and insightful. You make new age parenting seem so effortless, but I know you must have worked so hard on it. I am sure this VLF run up event offered our readers a new parenting model based on intimate dialogue and trust building along a two-way street. Thank you, readers, for being a great audience. I request Anuradha Saraf, our VLF patron, to present our author with a one-of-a-kind painting from the Alag Angle community made by Arya Ashtikar, especially for today's session.
And the author that is joining us today is Dr. Manali Pofre. She is author of some of the fine works of literature like Petals and Vechlele Moti, Amritulya, and many more. She has written essays on plethora of topics and some of the eminent personalities like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Tarabai Shinde, Savitribai Phule. She has also written articles in various magazines for their Diwali editions, some of the prominent ones. Ma'am is here to talk about her book Aadhar Vad. With a round of applause, we welcome you, ma'am.
अगदी छोट्या छोट्या वाटणाऱ्या सामान्य आयुष्यात घडणाऱ्या अनेक घटना ह्या घडीत असतात. आपली परीक्षा पाहणाऱ्या असतात, काही मनाला भिजवून टाकणाऱ्या असतात, चटका देणाऱ्या असतात. त्यातही स्त्री म्हणे अतिशय उत्कट असतं आणि संवेदनशीलही असतं ते. तर स्वतःसोबतच जगाकडे बघण्याची त्याची दृष्टी पण अगदी तीव्रपणे जागृत स्वरूपाची असते. तर ह्या माझ्या कथासंग्रहामध्ये प्रत्येकाचंच नियतीशी आणि निमित्ताशी आयुष्य जोडलेलं असतं. या दोघांचेही पुढे जाऊन काही शिकवतं ते अनुभवाच्या साक्षीने जोपासलेले आपलं आयुष्य. म्हणून तर जगण्यातलं काही सांगण्याच्या प्रत्येक मनाला एक ध्यास लागलेला असतो आणि हा ध्यास ध्येयपूर्तीकडेच नेणारा असतो. त्या आधारावर जीवनाची वाटचाल होत असते आणि ती डोळसपणे बघण्याची दृष्टी निर्माण होते. स्वतःला दुःखाला गुरफटलेलं किंवा मग सारखं तेच ते दुःख उगाळत बसून रडत बसणं हे मला कधीच पटलेलं नाही आणि आवडतही नाही. कारण सुख दुःख हे खो खो प्रमाणे एकमेकांना खो देत पुढे जात येत असतात आणि त्यावर मात करून यशासाठी प्रेरणा देणारे विचार मला जास्त प्रभावशाली आणि महत्वाचे वाटतात. अशाच या सुखदुःखांच्या घटना प्रसंगांचा आणि त्यावर मात करून त्याला सामोरे जाण्याच्या या कथासंग्रहातून मी 9 कथा समाविष्ट केलेल्या आहेत. हृदय स्पर्शमधील मृण्मयी म्हणजेच घर, संसार, मुले, पारिवारिक जबाबदारी सोबतच स्वतःचा छंद जोपासणारी स्त्री व्यक्तिरेखा मी साकारलेली आहे. आम्ही दोघे ह्या कथेत अनेक वर्षापासून आतमनात खोलवर साचलेले आणि मन मोकळी करणारी ती स्त्री मी जागृत केलेली आहे. त्याचसोबत मी तिन्ही संच या कथेत तन्मयीची जिद्द, चिकाटी आणि परिस्थितीवरती कशा प्रकारे मात करते हे सांगितलेलं आहे. नवीन पाऊलवाट यामध्ये मुली होत नाही म्हणून नवऱ्याने नाकारलेली स्त्री कथा साकारलेली आहे. तर नवे वळणमध्ये सुवर्णाची मेहनत साकारलेली आहे. अबोल नातं यात मृण्मयी आणि समीर यांची प्रेम कथा मी चित्रित केलेली आहे. या साकारलेल्या कथेतील ती कोण आहे, तिचे कर्तृत्व काय आहे, ज्यामुळे ती घडते ते कारण काय आहे, अशा तिच्या जगण्याच्या व्यक्तिमत्वाचे अनेक पैलू मी या कथांमधून उलगडून दाखविलेले आहेत. काळ बदलला, जगण्याचे संदर्भ बदलले आणि तिच्या अस्तित्वाचे संदर्भ आजही त्याचप्रमाणे आहेत. तिचे रंगरूप किंवा अवघ्या जीवनाचे रंगतरंग या कशावरही तिच्या इच्छा अपेक्षांचा कुठलाच अधिकार नाही. ती कधी आपल्या सख्यांसह वाहणारी खळखळती उमा असते, तर कधी ती द्रौपदी असते, तर ती कधी शांतपणे स्थिरपणे जगणारी उमा असते, तर ती अग्निपरीक्षा देणारी सीताही होते आणि कधी तर ती अर्धनट नारीश्वरही होते. ही तिच्या अनेक रूपांची सार्वत्रिक ओळखच येथे मी निर्माण करून दिलेली आहे. माझ्या या पुस्तकातील मृण्मयी, गीता आंटी, तन्मयी, अन्वेषा, अबोली, मुरगणयनी यांच्या स्त्री जीवनाच्या जगण्याचा वेध मी सकसपणे या कथांमधून संग्रहित केलेला आहे. आधारवड हा माझा कथासंग्रह म्हणजे स्त्री मनाच्या गाभाऱ्याचा शोध घेणारा धांदोडाच आहे. हा कथासंग्रह सर्व स्त्री मनाच्या भावभावनांचे सूक्ष्म प्रतिबिंब आहे. सर्व वाचकांच्या मनात घर करून राहतील, ज्यांच्यामुळे मी लिहिती राहिले, ज्यांनी माझ्या लिखाणास प्रोत्साहन दिले, अशा अनेक असंख्य वाचकांना ही माझी कलाकृती मी अर्पण करीत आहे. नमस्कार.
We at VLF would like to thank our title sponsor, L. Vishwaraj Environment Private Limited. We thank our sponsors, Inventis, SMS and Calderes. Our partners are Times of India, Hitwada, HelpLink, Alag Angle, AD Photography, Thinking Birds, The Refuge, SA Digital Films and Crossword.